been using a number of models to assess what's the maturity, is this the right time and all that. So he'll show us some of these models, and then it'll really help us to see how both an investment point of view as well as a technology leader point of view, how does a technology tracking can happen. So Ravi, thanks for joining us, and over to you.
Hey Vinay, thanks for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure and I would say privilege that, of course, IIT Bombay is where both of us went. Central Library was a place actually I spent a lot of time. So when Aparna told me that the building is coming near there, it brought back a lot of great memories. So thanks for your interest and hopefully this is useful to you. I'm going to share some of my perspectives and please feel free to ask any questions you have on the Zoom chat. So what I'm going to do is obviously I have a deck, but as I said, please raise your hand. We can keep it interactive. Uh, Vinay did a good job on giving a brief introduction for what I do in my day job, as well as what my passion is. So I'm going to, the title that we are putting for this presentation is trend spotting, right? And there are trends and there are fads and there are true trends and there are mega trends and so on and so forth. And our job, whether we are a technology executive, whether we are investor, is to figure out which one is real, which one is having real traction, which one can become the next big wave, and which one is going to fizzle out. I'm sure during COVID times, you have seen a lot of trends come up, right? E-commerce is one of them. Maybe that might be becoming stronger and more permanent, as people say. Commercial real estate, air travel, those are the things people say that those will be impacted even in long term. So how do we keep track of these trends? What is a framework that I personally use, and I have seen many other people use? Of course, this is not a framework I have come up with, but which I find extremely useful. So I'll walk you through some of that. So what we are going to do today is really, I'm going to set some motivation. Why do we want to spot trends? I'm going to share a couple of examples, right? I will walk you through the mental model that I use, and then a couple of examples from the industries I'm most familiar with. And that's going to take the first 40-45 minutes. And then maybe we'll take a small break, come back, and then we want to apply it in real life, right? To some of the trends that are happening right now. And we will take two examples. I have two current examples, and of course, those are the situations unfolding. So there is no final answer to that. But I want to see how we can apply the framework that we have seen and think about these trends as they are emerging. So I'll tell you a personal story. As Vinay told, that both of us left our corporate jobs, different companies, around 2006, and we went into some of the consulting slash startup slash self-exploration. Those are the kind of things we wanted to. We went on that journey, both of us in our independent ways. And around 2011, I mean, Vinay was obviously much farther along in that journey, and he had obviously found something, a niche which he wanted to continue on. And I felt that after 5 years, that okay, that's something I have done, I have explored. I want to get back to a corporate job where I could be more effective. And when I started looking around for opportunities to come back to corporate life, there were two trends that were playing out in the world. One, and I'm using, I hope you are familiar with Google Trends. Basically, it tells you how people are searching for a specific term, how that term is getting popular over the course of time. If you haven't played around with it, just go to Google Trends, right? And put any 2 or 3 or 4 terms, and it will tell you what's the frequency and behavior and what other things people are looking for. It's a fascinating thing to look at. So if you look at, there were two trends, as I said. 3D printing was one major trend, which I was personally actually fascinated with, because the startup incubator I was working with, they had a 3D printing startup in that. And I made some friends with those people, and they had that 3D printing machinery, and it was really fascinating to watch, right? And there was a lot of discussion about this is going to revolutionize manufacturing. So I was very fascinated with that. And then there was a cloud computing was also about mobile was already becoming mainstream, and the next wave in computing was considered to be cloud computing. And if you can see, this is from the Google Trends that interest had started really picking up in 3D printing, which is the blue line on this graph, right? So, and I had two career opportunities, if you will. One was on cloud computing side, one was on 3D printing side. So in hindsight, I was just lucky, right? The 3D printing, as you can see, this trend never really went anywhere. And you can still say it is in future, right? It hasn't become mainstream. It has stayed somewhat of a niche market, whereas cloud computing has just exploded. And obviously, from a career perspective, if you are interested in growth, career growth, company growth, business growth, those are the success metrics, then obviously cloud computing was a better choice. There was no way of knowing it then, but there was, in hindsight, that's how the trend played out, right? And that's what I feel many times, if you don't have and again, this is the stock chart of, there is a cloud computing story, which is Microsoft, right? Which is, I'm showing its chart in blue. It has kind of grown and grown over the years, whereas 3D Systems was the biggest 3D company, 3D printing software company. And if you can see that it peaked around 2013, 14, and then it hasn't gone anywhere, right? So if you look at what happens is many times, if you are a lay observer, all of this is clear only in hindsight. And that doesn't really help us making the decision, because in hindsight, you can see, okay, people have stopped searching for this particular term. It can be as simple as that. Stock charts of leading companies will tell you pretty much the same story. And all of that is hindsight 2020 wisdom. So the motivation I have for today's talk is really, can we do slightly better than that, right? Can we be slightly ahead of curve? And if you are even slightly ahead of curve, the rewards are really plentiful, right? You can choose the right technology to invest in. You can steer your career or company in the right direction. It's really the case of, that's the story of two friends in a jungle, and a bear approaches, and the one friend starts putting on his shoes, right? And the other friend says, you are a fool. The bear can outrun you. Whereas this guy says, yeah, I know bear can outrun me, but I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you, right? So that's the story. Essentially, if you're slightly ahead, you can outrun your competition, and the rewards are pretty plentiful. In case of this particular story, it's obviously one of them will survive. So what I wanted to share with you, what are some of the ways you can be slightly ahead of the curve? This is what we are going to spend some time. This is today's agenda. I hope I set up some little bit of motivation context, why we want to run a little bit faster and not wait for trend to be clear in hindsight. There are two mental models. I'm going to take a slight detour into theory, where what are the mental models which can help you to be slightly ahead of the curve. And the two specific ones I'm going to talk about is, one is this model called Google PageRank, and the other is Bayesian updating. Again, maybe the terms are familiar to you or maybe not. These are actually simple models in layman's terms. They are rigorous computational models, but we don't need to get into the computation or maths part of it. We can just look at the intuition behind the models and use these models in a fairly straightforward, intuitive way. So I'm going to talk a bit about these models. Then I'm going to show how would I apply it in my current work, which is Cloudera or the software as a service industry. I can show a few examples from the software as a service industry. And then what we are going to do is we are going to all participate in jointly applying this to couple of emerging situations, which will be Bitcoin and Bitcoin as money, right? And TikTok as a social network, and who will take place of TikTok, or who will take place of Bitcoin, if anything. So these are unfolding situations in the real life. So we will see if it helps us think better about these situations as they're developing. Okay, anybody has any question or comment? I'm just quickly popping over to see in Zoom. There is no break in this class. Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you, Vinay, for letting me know. So let me just keep plodding, right? So once I'm ready, I will tell you to pop the poll, and then we can all take the poll. But let me go back to my presentation then. Okay, so first model I wanted to tell you is about Google PageRank, and maybe some of you have heard about it, but me and Vinay and many people of our generation actually lived through um, different search engines or even HTTP as a protocol, right? And before Google came on scene, actually there were many search engines. Some of them were quite popular too, right? Google was not the first search engine. In fact, probably it was not even 10th. So what did they do differently? Right? There was obviously Yahoo was the mighty one, and there was Alta Vista and Lycos and many other names I can rattle off. So what was the one thing that Google do differently? They brought this intuition called PageRank. The search engines before then, what they were trying to do was really look at the page on the web, look at what keywords are on the page, and the more keywords that are on the page, or the more references that it was talking about a certain topic, it will try to rank that page higher. And that's a very naive approach, right? And what Google tried to do was something called PageRank algorithm, which they came up with. And the intuition, again, this is a mathematical algorithm. Some of you from computer science background, probably you study it in your courses for the rest of you. In layman term, the way it can be described as you look at a page, not about what the page is saying. Of course, there is one small indicator, but who else is voting for the page, right? And that means if I put a link from my page to Wikipedia, let's just say, that's not super important, right? But if Wikipedia links to my page, intuitively that makes sense, right? Because you believe that Wikipedia is much more trustworthy. So if there is a link from Wikipedia to my page, or from New York Times to my page, or whatever, that makes my page more trustworthy. And take that intuition to a global internet scale, right? So each link is a vote. When I link to, let's say I link to Vinay's page, that's my vote for Vinay's page. And if Vinay links to somebody else, that's Vinay's vote for that somebody on that particular topic. So that's a concept of vote. Now, how much valuable that vote should be? That vote should be as valuable as your page is, right? So it's a kind of a recursive algorithm. You first say how popular you are. That determines by how many votes you have got. That determines the weight of your vote. That determines the weight of votes you are giving out. And ultimately the algorithm converges, and then you say, okay, Wikipedia and New York Times and whatever else, these are more trustworthy votes compared to my particular site. And if you keep running this algorithm, you will find that quickly the sources of trustworthiness emerge. And what Google did was really take this intuition about who links to who, and they got it from research papers actually. And if you know, if you have studied some research paper for your BTech or MTech portion, you will see that every research paper has certain links below it, which refers to previous work in the field. And the more links that a paper has, the more authoritative or popular that paper is. It's the same intuition. So that's the first mental model we are going to use, right? Every time we look at a situation, we want to see whose votes we are going to count and what is the weightage on each vote. And how we are going to determine that is some combination of trustworthiness, authority. Obviously, we want to have a little bit of diversity, right? Because otherwise it can become an echo chamber. And we also want to look at unbiased votes. So if it's a paid media article, we all know that we want to give it a lower weightage. If it is an advertisement out and out, we know that it's not to be as trustworthy or as trusted as organic content that somebody has. So that's the first mental model we are going to look at. That when we look at any situation, we are going to collect the votes, we are going to give some weightage to each of the vote. We try to get diverse, unbiased votes, and then we can aggregate the votes and see what emerges at the top. The second mental model we have is something called Bayesian belief updates. And what this means is you, for any topic, you have a prior belief, right? So for example, US is going to go through a election next month. So people will have their prior beliefs. Democrats will think that Biden and Harris gang is going to win, or Republicans might think that Trump is going to win, and so on, right? So that's your prior belief based upon what you believe, who will win. And then what happens is, as the counting results start coming in, and again, if you remember 4 years back, there was a strong, all the polls and popular media, everybody was saying it was election that will most likely be won by Clinton, Hillary Clinton. And then as the results come in, that's what the evidence part says, right? As the results start pouring in, maybe first few states, first how many percentage of votes, this is the evidence. As the evidence starts coming in, you will have to change your belief to what is called a posterior belief, right? And as more and more evidence comes in, you will have to change your belief. And sometimes maybe the evidence matches what your prior belief was, in which case you are good, right? You don't have to change your belief much because the evidence that you are seeing matches your prior belief. And that, keep in mind that this prior belief is unique and individual for each person. As I said, Democrat will have a different prior belief and Republican will have a different prior belief. Let's take another example. If I tell you I'm going to toss a coin, your prior belief, and I ask you, do you think coin is fair? Most people will say, yeah, I mean, my prior belief is coin is fair. Now I keep tossing the coin and I manage to get 5 heads in a row. What's your belief now? Of course, it can happen by chance, but every time, and then let's say I toss the coin again and sixth also comes up ahead and seventh also comes up ahead. As this evidence starts mounting, you are going to say, maybe there's something wrong here, right? How come he's getting only heads? Maybe this coin is not fair, right? And this is your posterior belief will keep shifting, saying that the coin is unfair. However, if some of you know that if I'm a trained magician, what's your prior belief going to be? Your prior belief is not going to be, I'm going to use a fair coin and show you a magic. That's not how magic works, right? So your prior belief is going to be, there is some trick up Ravi's sleeve, which is going to pull. And as I show you evidence, then you say, hey, I knew there is some trick, right? So then in that case, the evidence doesn't shock you as much because your prior belief is that the coin is unbiased. So hopefully that gives you some flair of what this second model is. And now we are going to use these two models, the Google PageRank and Bayesian belief updates, to see as the new information comes in, as new evidence comes in, how do we want to recalculate the votes and update our belief in real time, right? And the faster you can do this and the more accurate and the better you can do this, uh, that's the way to stay slightly ahead of the curve. So I'm going to show you quickly how we can actually use this framework in one of the in the industry that I work in, software as a service industry. And as I said, take this as a demo that I'm going to show you a demo, and then we are going to do the practicals where we will work together on applying this framework. Okay, so what is SaaS? SaaS is a software as a service business. It's a huge industry enterprise software which has really taken off in last decade. This software is delivered over the web, so there is nothing to install, right? You just like you access through your browser. It is fast growth, definitely 86 unicorns. What we call this is with companies greater than $1 billion valuation, hundreds of public companies, thousands of emerging startups. If I were to show you a chart, this is actually one of the um, most popular set of companies here. Probably some of you know some names. Many of these companies are actually public companies, right? So for example, the meeting we are conducting is up here, right, on Zoom. We're talking about this meeting is being conducted on Zoom. Maybe you use Dropbox to share the files. Here was my company, actually, Hortonworks, which got merged with, this is my current company, Cloudera, that I work with. Maybe you sign some documents on DocuSign. So this is a really good large field of opportunities of startups, a lot of activity happening in this space. So if I were to look at now, let's say there are some new opportunities coming up. Maybe you are running mergers and acquisitions for your company in your career, or you want to look to join a company and you want to see which ones are going to be the winners, right? There are literally thousands or 10,000 startups. How do you know which one should you be joining or which one should you be considering acquiring? And let's take few examples here, which I have shown. First of all, first you need to understand. So now go back, think about, we want to apply our models, right? We want to apply this model called PageRank. We want to collect some votes and we want to see where the votes are going, what people are actually doing. That's most important. It's not so important what is being published in the popular media or what people are searching in Google, because those are lagging indicators, right? Those trends will be in hindsight. Those will be behind the curve. We want to be ahead of the curve. So you have to look at you need to know industry a little bit to understand whose votes are important. And that's where I have shown few examples here. So there is the most kind of, if you will call, granddaddy of software as a service company was Salesforce. This started around early 2000, and their target market is really big companies. And if you look at their another competitor, Zendesk, which started around 2010, then they are trying to go a little bit more mid-market. And if you look at the hot company of this decade or last few years, it's Twilio, which is offering communication software as service. And if you look at it, they're going even down the pyramid in small and business market. And you look at who is the buyer in the organization. Definitely for a Fortune 2000 company, you need to really have access to their C-suites, right? The CXO, CIO, CTO, who are going to make that decision. For a mid-market type of company or something that's sold at a department level, you need to have reach. These are the decision makers, VPs or heads. But if you look at the modern software as a service companies, developers hold a lot of value. Their votes are very important, because if they feel that this is a software which is easy for me to develop on, easy for me to integrate, there are a lot of other third-party components that are already integrated that makes my life easy, I'm going to use that. So that is a very powerful concept, that whose votes are important, right? And if you look at the companies who are the real decision makers, you will see and understand whose votes are important. So in this case, what is happening is, as software as a service industry goes through this wave one, wave two, wave three, in the third wave, developers have become supremely important and decision makers in terms of what software they adopt, and as a result, what software gets traction. So I'm going to, hopefully this time you will be able to see the sound coming in, right? And Vinay, tell me if you are not able to see that. So this is Steve Ballmer. He was the co-CEO. He was the founder with Bill Gates of Microsoft. And before Satya Nadella, he was the CEO of Microsoft. So let's see what he is saying. And you don't need subtitles. Just enjoy this.
Developers, 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 developers. Developers, 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 developers. Yes!
All right. So I hope you enjoyed that. So why is he getting so excited? excited on stage in front of thousands of people because he knows that developers control the mind share of which technologies will get popular. And if you look at recent moves by Microsoft, their acquisition of GitHub, that all talks about they want to control that mind share and the market. So again, keep in mind before we count the votes, you need to see what people are doing, not what they are saying, and that's very important. And the more costly an action is for somebody, it's harder to fake, right? Searching for something, giving a 5-star review is not very costly action. What we want to look at is what is it, what is a signal that end users are telling us, and those actions are harder to fake, which is obviously somebody paying money for something. It's a hard to fake because they are paying real money for it. And that's where when developers learn about an API, work on integrating that in their product, that's a costly action. That's almost irreversible action. And that's where those actions are something that's extremely important in this particular field, in software as a service. Those actions are very important, and you want to pay real attention to those actions. So if you were evaluating, I know we are coming towards the first half of this, but if you were evaluating software as a service companies, and a friend tells you an opportunity, or recruiter reaches out to you, or whatever might the situation be, here are some of the things where you can find those signals of what developers are doing, which are harder to fake. So first is there is this site, again, programmers among you must be very familiar with it, something called Stack Overflow, right? So here people ask questions, other people answer those questions, and there is a community. And community doesn't get built unless there is a traction. So this is a hard to fake signal, right? As I said, companies can issue press releases or throw some money at some of the influencers, and they can do those things, especially the big companies. But it's harder to forge a network or get a community going. So I would strongly recommend that. This is what I look at when I look at if a particular piece of software or a technology has a traction or not. I would go to Stack Overflow. I would look at what's the activity in that community. Quick example would be, I was looking at whether there is a company called MongoDB, which offers a new type of unstructured database, and then there are certain other competitors in it, right? So first thing we can do is we can look at, let's say I wanted to evaluate whether I should focus more on MongoDB or any one of its competitors, which technology I should use. So I can look at this Google Trends, and you can see that there is MongoDB, but as you can see, some of the interest is actually a little bit waning off, right? But an Amazon DynamoDB is a competitor. It's trying to pick up an Apache CouchDB. This is some another technology which might be worth tracking. However, if I really want to do a non-layman version of this, I go to something called Stack Overflow, and here it will tell me how many people are asking questions on MongoDB versus Amazon DynamoDB, right? Which is picking up, but if you look at it, MongoDB is still head and shoulders ahead. So as long as this trend persists, I am on a safe footing going with MongoDB. But if this starts dipping, then that's an early indicator that you will start seeing that people are not really asking these questions. So maybe the community is not getting or not staying as active as it used to be, and that would be my early warning or early indicator. So let's look at the second site I would go at. It's something called Postman. And again, I'm not going to click through this because we are slightly behind the time. But this is actually a company which was started in India, and it shows it helps developers to integrate those APIs easily in their own programs. And if you look at the Postman site, it has very nice stats on which APIs are getting traction and which APIs developers are finding useful. So I could click into this. Let me talk to you about the situation I was looking at. So I was looking at DocuSign as a potential investment. But I was worried that it doesn't seem like what they are doing is something very fundamentally revolutionary. I mean, why is Adobe not doing it, or Microsoft Word not doing it? Or I looked at, there are some competitors from Dropbox acquired a company called HelloSign. So I was somewhat concerned that whether DocuSign will be able to maintain its lead. And let's do that. And if you go and go to this Postman site, okay, I should have explored the link here. So sorry, I tried this today morning. There's something wrong with my profile, but what it will tell you is it will tell you how many other developers are using DocuSign, and the numbers are between DocuSign and HelloSign are something like 20:1, right? And as long as those numbers stay that way, because that is the real sign, developers are integrating more DocuSign than HelloSign. And if you can keep tracking those signals, then you will know that what you are seeing is a real trend and not a fad, or not something that's getting disrupted by competition. So that's where I wanted to show you a small example of how I apply these mental models in the real life in my own industry. And what we are going to do is now work through live examples, and two live examples which I want to take. And again, I don't know the answers here. I'm as good as you or anybody else is. The two examples I want all of us to walk through is really, first is Bitcoin, whether that will emerge as a new gold or digital gold or new store of value. And the second example I want to take, which might be actually more relevant for India, because there was a talk that TikTok will get banned in other countries, but at least in US, they seem to have resolved that conflict, but it continues to be banned in India. So what will take place of TikTok, right? And these are the two examples we are going to walk through together. So let me take a small break. Before we start here, I want you to take a small quiz, right? And the quiz will have, what is your current belief? Remember, we want to talk about Bayesian belief updating. So I want you to go with whatever your current belief. There is no right or wrong here, right? So for each of the examples, Bitcoin and TikTok, we will I'll give you 5 options and pick the one which you feel is your strongest belief. And I know it won't be binary. Maybe you feel that choice 1 is 50% likely and choice 2 is 20% likely. In that case, choose choice 1, right? Go with your strongest belief. So let's see if we can bring the
Yeah, Ravi, you can
poll up.
actually launch the poll.
Oh, I can launch the poll
Just
here.
check, just check.
Shall
Yeah.
I launch it?
No, okay, poll 4. Is this poll 4? No, which? Oh yeah, you can launch it.
Yeah, it is poll 4 actually.
Poll 4. Okay,
Polling
so
Yeah.
for page.
yeah. Okay, I have it.
Yeah, just launch it.
Yeah,
So
there are
you will
2
launch
questions
it
it is
or-
launching.
Right.
Okay. So
You
let
want
me
it?
launch.
Okay, good.
Okay. So as I said, there are 2 questions. One is about Bitcoin. The second is about TikTok. Read the questions and go for whatever you believe, whatever is your strongest belief at this moment. And we'll take maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes for people to go through this. Okay, we'll have 20 more seconds. Again, there are no right or wrong answers. Just go with whatever you feel is most likely. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. So I'm going to end the poll. And I'm going to share the results, right? Hopefully you can see the results. So the first question was, in next 20 years, Bitcoin will be, and here are some of the answers. So some people feel that it will be next global currency overtaking USD, right? Uh, Equal number of people feel that it will continue to occupy a small niche and used mainly for criminal purposes, right? Where it's either money laundering or paying for weapons or extortion or those kind of things, because it's not easy to trace who is doing what with it. One person believes that will be exposed as a Ponzi scheme, fraud, and collapse to zero, right? There are a couple of people who don't know enough about the subject. So thanks for letting me know that, so we can have a quick 2-minute intro to what it is. The second question was about the TikTok, and in next 2 years, TikTok's place in India will be taken over by, and lot of people think that it will be taken over by a global giant such as FB or Instagram or whatever, Snap, or maybe some other global giants. Um, and there is some representation about a local giant or a local startup. Nobody seems to believe that TikTok will be back in a modified format. That's surprising to me, but good to know that, right? And then obviously something else which we cannot imagine today is that is always a choice, by the way, right? Because many times it actually is really many times what happens is something else happens which nobody is predicting. But thanks for participation here. Any question or comment on what we are going to do here? I'll take 2 minutes. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat here. We can take questions, because now we are going to get into that interactive session where we are going to think through. So these are the two problems, right? And these are your various choices. And I want to present some information and see if that makes you change your beliefs, or how do you go about thinking about this. So any questions so far on whether the framework, whether the software as a service examples that I shared, anything at all, right? You want to know a bit more about Bitcoin, any question we can post here. Okay. So Pratham asked, thank you, Pratham, for asking, what is a Ponzi scheme? So Ponzi was, I mean, you might have heard multi-level marketing kind of scheme, right? So Ponzi was the original con man. If you look at Ponzi, Charles Ponzi, I think his name was. So what that scheme is really, you might have seen various formats of it. It basically is a pyramid scheme. So in pyramid scheme, what happens is you collect money from early adopters. Let's say I start a pyramid scheme, right? What I do as a fraudster is I collect money from early investors and I tell them I'm going to double your money in something ridiculous, let's say in 3 months, right? And some of the, let's say first 10 people put that money and I give them double their money in 3 months. What happens is word of mouth spreads, right? And then there are other people who want to come in. And as long as there are more people coming in, I can take that money and pay off the initial first. But obviously, this is not a business model, right? It's not sustainable. At some point, this whole thing collapses, and that's called a Ponzi scheme. And there are major frauds have happened throughout the history. If you watch Netscape show Bad Boy Billionaires, I don't know whether is that being shown in India? Vinay, do you know? Where they have show about Sahara.
No, I'm not. I don't know, Ravi. Actually.
Okay, so
These
that's
guys
a
are much-
latest show.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a latest show. So you can look at Sahara case study on that.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, so hope and many people believe that Bitcoin is a kind of Ponzi scheme, right? Where initial people will make some money and then they will run away and the whole thing will collapse.
So Ravi, you might also want to take a couple of minutes to just tell what Bitcoin.
Sure.
There may be few people who may not
Oh yeah. There are two people who said they don't know enough about the subject. So I will tackle that right before we get into the case study.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, thanks Aditya for letting me know it's streaming in India. Yeah, so episode 3 is really on. Yeah, just like Harshad Mehta did scam, exactly like that, right? So initial few people they pay off, then the word of mouth spreads. Lot of other people due to their greed they jump in, and then the fraudster disappears. Right, that's the modus operandi. Okay, any other question on anything? Okay, if not, I'll briefly touch about. Let me stop sharing the poll. Let me talk about Bitcoin. Uh, just give me a minute. Okay, let me first talk about what Bitcoin is for a few minutes, and then we can get into the case study. So, if you look at the money as a concept, right? Society has money as a concept since the civilization started, essentially, because bartering is not a good way, right? Before the concept of money was invented, it was all barter. I mean, you grow rice and I grow whatever turmeric, and you and I can trade that way. And then if I need some other service, let's say I need some nails, then I'm going to take my rice to person who is making nails in their workshop and get that from them, and so on. As you can imagine, the friction is very hard because friction is too high because there is no standardization. And that's where many civilizations quickly emerge to, we need to have a medium of transacting this, and that cannot be the goods themselves that are being bartered. So obviously the medium of transaction has to have certain properties. You should be easily able to store it. So that's where some societies adopted like shells or maybe even metal pieces. And it shouldn't be perishable. That's first part. It should be easy to transport. That's the second part. Third part is it has to be rare and unique, right? It has to be rare, because if it is not rare, then everybody will essentially mint their own money, and then the supply of that money will be flooded. So you can't then use it as a mode of transaction or medium of transaction. And societies have dealt with it in many different ways. And one of the most common ways human societies have dealt with is using gold as a standard, right? And why gold? If you ask why gold has value, even obviously in Indian society, but many other societies, is because that was considered very hard, a non-fungible source of value. It's not easy to dig gold out of the ground. It's not easy to purify it. But once you have that extracted and purified, you can keep it, you can hide it, you can carry it with you. Maybe not so easily, but you can still carry it with you. It has a certain value which comes because it's not easy to get new supply of gold. And hence many societies standardize on something like gold, which is you can then derive other value from it. So instead of using rice or corn or whatever as bartering mechanism, it was in gold. And then everything can get pegged into gold. That 1 ounce of gold is equal to whatever the commodity you might be trying, might want to exchange. And your life becomes simpler, because then you don't have to think about how much rice to how much corn you are going to exchange, or how much rice for a haircut. You are not thinking in that term. Only thing you need to figure out is what is the relationship to gold, right? So how much rice is 1 ounce of gold, and how many haircuts are 1 ounce of gold. And once you standardize that based upon demand and supply, then you don't have to really go to barter your rice to get a haircut, right? Because you can always have those gold or gold coins or something that is derived from gold, which you can use as method of transaction. And that has worked for thousands of years. And now what is happening is some people have used the internet technology to come up with a better version of gold, if you will, right? They called it gold 2.0, which has the same properties. Its supply is strictly limited. So it is mathematically proven that more than 21 million Bitcoins cannot exist in the world, which is huge. right? So that's the first property. So it is equivalent to gold in terms of probably even better, because you never know where another supply of gold might come out. Maybe some company can get into deep sea mining or something, and there is more gold there. We never know that, right? So whereas the supply of Bitcoin is completely fixed. Second is gold is it's relatively easy to carry, but it's not that easy, right? You cannot just get on a flight and carry with you whatever the limit is. Maybe you can carry a little bit whatever your jewelry, but imagine if you are a bank or some entity and you want to carry this gold over and make a purchase in foreign land, that's just not possible, right? So whereas with Bitcoin, since it is digital, all the transactions can be settled instantaneously. The third is it's pretty cheap, and since again it's a digital technology, right? The reason we don't use gold in our day-to-day exchange is because it's very cumbersome. You cannot carry around gold biscuits in your pocket and go to shopping. So the challenge then happens is gold gets diluted, right? So what we see is that our currency, for example, Indian rupee, about 10 years ago, it used to be $1 was 45 rupees, right? And now it is 75 rupees. Why has it depreciated? And that's because the inflation in India is high, right? But if you look at in terms of gold, those currencies, the reason we still have to carry currencies is because gold is not easy for, especially for smaller transactions. And that's where, since Bitcoin is digital, it can be infinitely scalable, right? So you can have 0.0000 whatever, 1 unit of Bitcoin, or even smaller units of Bitcoins. And those are very easy to transact. It just like any other mathematical or digital transaction. So you don't have to worry about government currencies. So that is where it gets into hotter waters, because then governments are afraid that they will lose the power. At the same time, people believe that there are many countries which have gone through hyperinflation. If you look at countries like Venezuela or Argentina, or now Turkey, those countries went through hyperinflation very recently. And what that means is the value of money essentially becomes zero. And that's where people have trusted gold more than their own country's currency. Right now, that position is to a large extent being fulfilled by US dollar. So the whole world thinks that US dollar is a stable value currency. At the same time, US is also another country, right? So if you look at the power of balance that is happening, if you fast forward 10 years, will China become a bigger economy in US? That's quite likely, right? Fast forward 20, 30 years, will India become one of the biggest economies? Very, very likely. In that sense, why would you trust USD and US government to control the supply of money? And since there are a lot of countries which are pretty upset, including China, India, other countries in Europe, with US saying that only US gets a free pass to kind of print its own currency, which they do not consider it's fair because it gives unfair advantage to the US, right? So there are a lot of these, I would say, currents which propel Bitcoin into becoming the next standard, which is just like internet. It becomes a global standard. It is completely digital. So it has many of those properties where no single entity controls it. There is no company behind it. It's just like internet, right? That's a very distributed, very hard to control, at the same time, hugely beneficial. So hopefully that's a quick lesson on Bitcoin for those of you who are interested. Obviously, it's a fascinating field. You should study about it. Any question on Bitcoin before we get into the case study? All right, so let's get back. Okay, question. Why did you ask specific? Not right. Yeah, good question, Aditya. So definitely cryptocurrencies are, again, the specific reason I asked about Bitcoin is that is taking the place of gold. If you look at other cryptocurrencies, they serve other purposes, right? So Bitcoin is not the only cryptocurrency. There are other for example, Ethereum is another currency, but it is trying to take a role of digital contracts, which is a different role, right? And I don't want to get into too many intricacies about other cryptocurrencies. I'm talking about the most prominent one, which is trying to take place of gold or USD, right? That's what the case study we want to evaluate is not whether cryptocurrencies will become popular, because they have other legitimate uses, right? You can use them to trade digital assets or, for example, gaming rewards and credits and so on. But we don't want to get into that. My case study that we are going to work through, but again, great question, Aditya, is really whether Bitcoin will replace USD or gold as the prominent currency which whole world trusts. Okay, so I'm going to launch into the working of the examples. Okay, can you see my screen? I hope you can see. Okay.
Yeah, I can see, Ravi. We can see.
Okay. So yeah, we covered some of this. What is Bitcoin? It's considered gold 2.0 as a store of value, digital currency, digital payment platform, money that cannot be regulated, and so on, right? So now I'm sure a lot of you have heard, we start with a prior belief, right? As you said, we are going to apply this mental model of everybody has a prior belief of what this thing is based upon whatever they have heard so far, right? It need not be, the point is not that you have to have an accurate prior belief. We have to start somewhere. We hear something of first time, right? Maybe some of you, they heard about Bitcoin first time, which is perfectly fine, right? Then that's what you have, some prior belief, and then you get some evidence, and evidence can be a friend telling you about it, you reading about it, some interviews, some YouTube, maybe personal experience. You start an account and this, you see a new currency there, whatever. And with that evidence, then you evaluate, okay, do I need to adjust my belief after what I have seen? And then you change your belief if need be. The more shocking the evidence is, the more believable the evidence is, the more your belief is going to change. And this is a continuous process which you engage in. So here was, I first got exposed to Bitcoin actually in 2017, right? There were some people in my office, most of the youngsters, they were really completely, they took their life savings, they invested in Bitcoin. Here was a price of Bitcoin in early 2018, right? 2017, when you can almost consider it like a bubble price. It started the year less than at $5,000 per Bitcoin, and it quickly went up to 15,000, 17,000. That was the price when I started hearing about it. In fact, some of my cousins asked me about it, and then I know that this is something that's causing people to pay attention to it. And my prior belief was like in 2017-18, I don't really know what Bitcoin is. I can't really value it because I came from a strong kind of value investing mindset. If you know, I respect and follow Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, that school of thought very strongly. So I don't know what it is. I can't really value it. And looking at other people, my belief was really, I have no opinion, right? And I say, is Bitcoin worth $1 million? Maybe, and this is my belief curve, right? As I said, I'll put maybe there's a 1% chance that it is $1 million. Is this a fraud? Maybe I'll put some 5% chance on that. Maybe the value is somewhere in between, but I really don't know. This is more called like a uninformative belief, right? Because I don't really know much. I can't really comment on it. Now, what happened was this
coin was a fraud.
I'm going to show you a couple of videos which came around at that point in time, right? So I'm going to put the closed caption, and this is Jamie Dimon. He is CEO of the biggest bank in US, JP Morgan, right? This is the biggest bank in US. He's the CEO of this bank for last 2 decades. And this was a video that came out in 2018 where they asked him, what is your opinion about Bitcoin? So hope you can see the subtitle.
Bitcoin was a fraud.
Yeah.
Why is Bitcoin a fraud?
Yeah, so separate blockchain, which is a technology, from Bitcoin, the currency. And now there are multiple currencies. First, and the reason, and I'm not saying go short, because I know Jim.
Okay, so here the price was 4,000 USD for Bitcoin, right? And as you can see that this person who I respect a lot, actually, he's one of the best run banks. Consider him like Uday Kotak and Kotak Mahindra Bank equivalent of India. I read his annual letters, and when I see this person is saying that Bitcoin is fraud, then I would tend to believe him, right? I have no reason to say I should have. He seems to be the most informed person about money in general, running the biggest bank, has huge credibility.
About 5 years
So
ago,
let's look at, I'm going to show you this another video of Warren Buffett, right? And as you know, he's the richest or used to be the richest man in the world based upon his investments, very highly respected investor. His annual letters are again read worldwide by a lot of people. So this is again in 2018 where a reporter is asking Warren Buffett about what's his opinion about Bitcoin.
About 5 years ago, we asked Charlie Munger, we were sitting right there, what he thought of Bitcoin, and he said rat poison. Back then it was about $100+ per Bitcoin. Today it's 9,000. Is it still rat poison?
Well, probably rat poison squared.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. So it was at $9,000, and Warren Buffett himself, the god of investing, says that this is rat poison squared. So now, what happens when I went through this? So on one hand, my colleagues and younger people in the company getting excited, and they say this is the next digital currency. This is gold 2.0. It's going to overtake USD, and then Jamie Dimon says in September 2017 that Bitcoin is a fraud, and Warren Buffett, May 2018, says rat poison squared. People I highly trust, respect, right? So here is my belief, right? And if you can, as I told you, originally I had no idea. I was like, it could be anywhere from fraud to $1 million. That's my belief. And now after hearing these people, and again, these are the two votes, right? Consider them, these are the votes. And what have they voted with? They said this is a fraud, right? And my personal belief in that case shifts, which is, okay, I'm 98% sure that this thing is a fraud, right? This is some scam is happening here. And I even told people that please be careful. Don't, if you want to put your lottery money, go and have fun. That's your business, but don't put your life saving in this thing, right? And here are some people who are saying, don't do it. So then what happened? So, but let's that is the scenario in 2018. And as I told you, this is not a once done and shut kind of thing, because technology evolves, ecosystem evolves, new players emerge, new things happen every day. And what do you need to do as a result of that? You need to keep collecting the votes, right? That's your job as a businessman, as an investor, as a entrepreneur, to understand, is the landscape changing? And if you look at it, you need to, as we said in the Google PageRank model, you need to see which are the votes which are important and how much you are going to weigh each vote. You cannot just say, okay, I listened to Jamie Dimon, I listened to Warren Buffett, this thing is a fraud, I'm done, right? And maybe that's okay if you have a casual interest. But if you are an entrepreneur who is looking for the next big change, if you are an investor who is looking for that next 10x, 100x opportunity, it's imperative that you keep track of these votes and keep track of unfolding scenarios. So if you look at it, whose votes, let's think about it. Whose votes matter in this case? Obviously, users matter, right? Because if people are actually using Bitcoin, gold is based upon belief, so is Bitcoin. So if there are actual users, let's say millions of users actually using it, putting their money in it, downloading it into their wallets, using it for payment, that's super important, right? Then you can look at platform. Is it only one company which is supporting it, or there are tens of companies? How reputable those companies are? Are those public companies? What are the exchanges? Are these exchanges regulated? Those votes matter. Who else is in the ecosystem? Financial institutions, right? Which banks are on this platform? Are they supporting it? There is another concept called custodians, which is can you make a deposit in Bitcoin? Can you take a loan out on Bitcoin, and so on. Fintech, venture capital, very important. What's MasterCard, Visa, other fintech players are doing? governments, what is their position, right? Is it considered illegal? Are they trying to ban it? Have they tried to ban it, and what happened? Are there progressive governments like so USA, China, India, big countries? Maybe there are smaller countries which are much more progressive, like Singapore and Malta, for example, where a lot of these Bitcoin exchanges are based. What is their take on it? And regulators are obviously important. Like in Indian context, it will be RBI, and in US context, it will be US Treasury. What they say, courts, all these regulatory bodies are important, and all these votes matter, right? And as these votes come in and as these votes change, it's up to us to update our beliefs. So let's walk through this case study for Bitcoin. So as I said, around 2000, early 2018, I have made up my mind that this is mostly fraud. Then let's see, 2 years have passed since then. What has happened? Okay. Then when I'm looking at news, this news comes to in my feed or my reading that Coinbase, this is the #1 actually exchange in US, not exchange, brokerage, if you will, right? This is where you can open an account, buy Bitcoin and sell Bitcoin and so on. I have an account here. And it's a Y Combinator funded company. So you know that this is a legit business. It's not a fly-by-night kind of operator. And if you look at how many number of users they have, look at this number, is quite striking, right? And this is at the start of 19. So it must be even more. This is 30 million, right? To keep that in context, in US, the adult population is about 150 million. So 1 in 5 US users or US citizens have an account on Coinbase. That's pretty significant. So it's not a small thing, right? And as you can see, the adoption, the number of people actually having an account has grown exponentially. So now that's some bit of evidence, right? And as each piece of evidence comes in, think about what it does to your prior belief. Right? This was shocking to me because I was operating under the assumption that this thing is mostly fraud, in which case you won't see this kind of users, right? You will see users come in, go through a growth, and then they taper off because then they understand that, hey, it's not a get rich quick scheme, or they lose money or something bad happens to them and then they go away, right? Whereas this is not going away. So now maybe my reaction is I want to take a pause and look at it a little bit more carefully. Then I look at the price, right? And it obviously, as I said, 2017, 18, that bubble happened, then the prices crashed, a lot of people left. And then if it was a true bubble or fraud or scam, you would expect that this price to just drop down and go to zero, right, at some point. But that hasn't happened, right? What has happened is actually now it's around, if you look the quote now, it's about $13,000. So it's not as high as 17,000, but it is $13,000 is pretty significant chunk of money. So there are real users. There is a real price quote out here. What else is happening? So now I'm changing my belief slightly, right? So my prior was this is most likely a fraud, as I said, after listening to Demon and Buffett. And now I'm looking at some data and then I say, okay, I'm not still going to change my belief drastically, right? Still maybe 60, 70%, I at this point in time, I'm still thinking this is a fraud. But now I'm coming around to, there is another belief developing in my mind that maybe there is some value for it. Maybe for if somebody is living in that high inflation country, like let's say Turkey, or let's say you are in Hong Kong, you are worried that China is going to take over all your money, then you want to move that money out or whatever. So there are certain niche uses, or if you are some person in Africa and it's ruled by dictators and you are really not sure about value of your money, maybe you will move that money into Bitcoin. So my belief now is, okay, it has some niche use and it will continue to have niche use, right? Based upon the usage that I'm seeing, based upon the price that it is holding. So we are going to then I'm going to fast forward, right? I'm going to fast forward to this year, May, June, July. And we can see some of the news that started coming in. So this is the same JP Morgan. The CEO is still the same guy, Jamie Dimon. And what this news is saying is takes on Coinbase, Gemini as its customers. right? So in 2018, the CEO is saying this is fraud. In 2020, apparently he and the company have changed their mind. And now they are starting to take customers, which are other crypto exchanges. Basically, to get money into crypto exchanges, you need banking service. And consider this as a vote, right? So JP Morgan essentially is now approving that these are, I'm giving a vote that this Coinbase and Gemini, these are legit businesses. Otherwise, JP Morgan would not stick its name to that, isn't it? Because if imagine if this were turned out to be big frauds, then that's a huge reputation risk for JP Morgan that you didn't do your due diligence. And this is the news. Its CEO once called Bitcoin a fraud, but now US banking giant JP Morgan Chase has added its first cryptocurrency exchange customers, right? So that's a substantial change. Now, again, that behooves you to change your beliefs, at least slightly, if not dramatically. So the next piece of news I want to share, this is coming in June 2020, right? And you might have heard again, Fidelity is one of the oldest US financial institute. They have a lot of businesses, including mutual funds. And they offer these custodian services where consider this as bankers' banks, right? So they started supporting some of those crypto exchanges. Now, this is a news from July 2020. Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal are changing their tune. So these are, again, big financial players. I'm sure you have seen their brands, and these are really hundreds of billion-dollar market cap companies, right? So now in July 2020, they are saying that maybe we should take a good look at this thing because maybe there's something real here, right? And what happens is, this is a news just from 2 days ago. If you are tracking this news as I am, because I'm personally interested in this technology, here is the news that says PayPal allows Bitcoin and crypto spending. So this is now, PayPal is a big financial house worldwide. And it is, what it is saying is it has entered the cryptocurrency market. It will allow, it has 260 million users. All its customers will be able to buy and sell Bitcoin and other virtual currencies. And all the merchants it's going to enable to pay through the Bitcoin, right? So the reason I'm sharing this case study with you is your job, as I said, is to keep tracking this news and say, okay, how credible, has this vote changed? And how shocking is this based upon what I know? And how much should I change my belief? Here is, we looked at some of the regulators. Here's the legal status, right? And green means it's completely legit to own, buy, sell, hold Bitcoin. Red means it's completely banned, right? And yellow means it's kind of in a gray zone. So a regulation is still yet to be developed. But if you look at India Supreme Court, they said that the RBI cannot ban it. That had come few months ago, and as a result of that, some exchanges in India have also started and flourishing. But if you look at, there are large green zones here. There are many countries in the world where it is completely legit and legal. So now I would stop and say that, okay, having seen all of this, I want you to take that poll again and share with me what is your posterior belief on Bitcoin. And again, this is not an exercise about who is right or wrong. Each person is going to have a different posterior belief, right? A person could still stay here because that's what maybe they have seen what happens in other such fads, and people lose a lot of money and they say, hey, I'm not really comfortable with this new tech. And you might have seen there are people from earlier generations, your parents, your grandparents, maybe they're still not comfortable with like buying online or banking online, and that's perfectly okay, right? That's their belief on. So some people might still believe that this is a fraud, right? And some people might believe, no, this is like so huge that this is going to be the next USD. And if that happens, actually people have estimated if that happens over the course of next 20 years, if it becomes as valuable as gold, the price of each coin will be $1 million, which is like 100 times from where it is today. All right, so I'm going to take a small pause here. Any questions on this before? I have a second case study, but which is fairly short. So I'm going to just stop sharing, take any questions or anything we have here.
Ravi?
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, I'm just taking a little more generic thing. So, suppose instead of Bitcoin, if it were 3D printers, suppose I'm tracking that trend.
Mm-hmm.
You had these 6 players, users, platform, financial institutes, fintech, government, and regulators. Suppose I have to do equivalent. What you're suggesting is you find out who all. So I have to do users of 3D printers, platforms for. Is that what you're suggesting also?
Correct. So I would map the ecosystem, right? And I would say who are the key players in this ecosystem, right? And what is their adoption looking like? So for example, if they say, oh, and that's thanks for asking that, Vinay, right? So for 3D printing, the original use cases were these are niche parts that can be printed first, right? For example, let's say you are a airline repairing shop or Boeing or whatever, right? Each airplane requires tens of thousands of parts, and it's not easy to stock it at every location worldwide, right? So what happens is if some part gets bad, then they have to fly that part from wherever their nearest warehouse is, and that's a costly operation because it takes several hours. By that time, the plane is down; it cannot be put in service. So that's a hugely costly operation. So the thinking was that each repair shop will have this a 3D printer where they will download the design and print it out, right, as required. Now, that would be one key indicator for me that how many such shops exist. Are they actually doing it? Because that's a signal hard to fake.
Yeah, yeah, good. Yeah.
So that's just an example, right? And then you can look at job opportunities for people who are designing 3D design, maybe on LinkedIn, maybe on some other sites. Again, those are the signals that you will look for.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so I have a comment from Shubhendu, but I'll just say, hey, that's a good comment, right? We will not get into the details of that, but definitely that's a belief, right? Some people will have a belief that supply is limited, so then that cannot serve as a value of money, and that's entirely fair. I'll tell you another belief. There is a strong belief in value community that something that doesn't have a cash flow cannot be a store of value, right? So they like, for example, if you look at a business, it generates cash flow or it is expected to generate at some point in time. Or a real estate, it generates cash flow because you can get rent. And that's why a lot of people in actually investing don't even believe gold is a true source of value, because they feel that gold doesn't, including Warren Buffett himself, he doesn't believe gold is a good source of value because it doesn't have a cash flow, right? It doesn't generate that cash and give it back to you. Whereas if you have a farm or a house or a factory, or those are things which generate cash flow, and the value of that asset comes from cash flows, right? So that's where Bitcoin is in the class of gold, where it doesn't have cash flows. The value comes from its rarity, right? Like a rare painting. What is the value of a rare painting? It's really, the value is determined by whether other people want it and how much they are willing to pay for it and so on. So it's a different class of monetary product. All right, so we have our last case study, which I will go through. And again, here I expect all of you to know a lot more than me, but this is a situation I'm personally interested in and tracking. And hence, I'm really interested in hearing more from you, actually, as we keep evaluating.
We have 10 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I'll just have 5 minutes for this, and I want to really hear from you, right? So I don't have to explain this to you. What is TikTok? Maybe you can explain to me better. So we are going to apply the same framework, right? As I said, first you have to choose the right category, that whether this is an aggregator of or this is a platform. And what I mean by that is if you look at it, Bitcoin is more like a platform where there are users, there are providers, and does this platform have a network effect? That's what you will try to evaluate. Whereas something like a social network, which is an aggregator, you have providers which are putting the content on the platform, and then there are users who are consuming the content. And what happened after the ban of TikTok was announced? Basically, Instagram launched Reels, right? And I'm sure you can see it. I see it occasionally. I don't particularly find it very compelling, but that's a really huge company, great reach, a huge fan base. So this is a very serious competition that is coming in. Microsoft, there was a news that it's going to acquire some properties of TikTok. I think that deal has fizzled out, but that's something that was still in the race. So again, now you can say that I asked you the question. Each person will have different beliefs, right? That some people might say TikTok will come back in the new owner. They will just make sure that it will get sold off to a new owner, and the new owner will run the TikTok as the network, which is what seems to be happening in US, right? They sold the ownership, large part of ownership, to Oracle, and Oracle said that they are going to comply with all local regulations and government rules and the data locality rules. And that's why TikTok is not banned in US, because Oracle came in and said that we are going to acquire this, and that could still very well happen in India. It could be a local startup which hits, it's a niche that needs to be occupied, or it could be a global giant, which maybe a Snap or FB or Insta can bring out a product. So now let's very quickly look at the model that we are going to use. The whose votes are important, right? And if you look at it, this is I would put it on a scale of intimacy. If you look at various social networks, right? These are TikTok is on the extreme right, more like YouTube, right? So the emphasis on suppliers, really. How much content is there? How good is that content? Is that content engaging and fun? Whereas if you look at something like Snap or even Insta to some extent before Reels, it's really more emphasis on consumers, right? Snap or WhatsApp or my other friends, family members on that. It's more one-to-one kind of connection. And then you can plot these other in between somewhere. And then you can see whose votes are more important. Is it consumers or is it suppliers? And in TikTok's case, I strongly believe, again, correct me if I'm wrong, that it really suppliers who matter a lot. If those creators, those influencers, I wouldn't even call them the creators, go away from TikTok for one reason or another, the platform will die. And as long as those creators are there, the platform is very active. So again, you can look at some sites. We are not going to go here, but this is one of the sites I keep track of called Social Blade, which tells you how many creators are on that platform, how many users they have. Are they moving from one platform to another platform? Because some creators actually took their communities and tried to move to another platform. And whether they were successful, not successful, you can track all these statistics and try to be slightly ahead of the curve. Okay, so that's where we are in terms of TikTok. And since we have 1 minute, we can really go here and see what's happening here. And if you look at who are, so I'm sure you know these names more than me. So they would like Charlie D'Amelio and Addison Ray, and all these sound like foreign names to me, but I'm sure you are more familiar. And I would track, are these people continuing to do uploads? Are their follower ranks increasing? And if that is happening, the platform is in a healthy state. And if that's not happening, then the platform is in trouble. So with that, I'm going to stop the sharing here, take few questions, and we can run the same poll again, just to see whether any of you have changed your opinion. When I look at this, though, I would say that in India, definitely TikTok, the space is wide open. In US, at least, it continues to remain an active network. So any questions before we relaunch the poll, or can we relaunch the poll again? The same poll? I can do that actually myself, right?
Shall
The
I
poll
do that?
4. No, I can do that.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think you
relaunch
can do
poll
that.
4.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay, so I have relaunched it. Can you see the poll?
yeah, I can see the poll.
Okay, so we are going to take a couple of minutes. Please, again, put the most prominent after you have gone through this little bit of exercise with me. Please take the polls again. And if there are any other questions, of course, I know we are running out of time, but happy to answer now, or I will put my email. Happy to chat with you offline as well. So let's take 2 minutes to look at. Okay, so if you have made up your mind, please put it in next 10 seconds because I would like to close this poll and get to the wrapping comments. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. Again, thanks for active participation. And this is the great part for me because this is where I learn a lot, right? So seems like I have been pretty persuasive. The number of people saying that next global currency has gone up quite significantly. This is awesome. And again, I don't mean to persuade you by any means. It's really up to you to, as I said, I want to show you the framework. I want to show you how I evaluate the evidence. And I think as a rational decision maker, it's up to us to evaluate all the news, all the opinions, and update our beliefs, right? Not stay stuck. And it's great to see that a lot of people have changed their beliefs, right? After hearing some information, getting more knowledgeable about the topic. So that's the best part for me. It doesn't really matter which direction you changed your opinion, but at least some of you have changed your opinion. I look at it like the Bitcoin, there seems to be now probably a better understanding and a belief that it could become the next global currency. And even on TikTok, I would say that a lot more people have taken part in this poll, and there are some, like last two options were not represented, and now there are some people who believe that that will be the option. So that's great to see. So thank you again for solid, strong participation. So with that, over to you, Vinay.
Okay, let's shall we stop sharing the results?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think we just talked about this technology life cycle in the last couple of sessions, and this is definitely a very good input as to how one can really check where a technology lies in its maturity cycle. And I think, frankly, Ravi, even I need to really look at this ecosystem tracking view myself on technologies, and really nice to have you here and look at these frameworks. Very nice. Thanks a lot. Yeah. So really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, folks. Thanks for joining. I know it's late in the night and Dashara is tomorrow, so happy Dashara to everybody and have a great day.
Yeah. So Ravi, we will have the slides posted in. I mean, we'll have the
Sure.
slides. So you will.
Yeah.
We will have the slides. Yes. Yeah. So thank you, guys, and happy Dasara to all of you. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
joining.
everybody. Thank you, Vinay. Thank you, Ravi.
Yeah. Thanks, Aparna.
Yes. Happy Dashera to everybody.
Thank you, Aparna.
Yeah. Bye. Bye.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye. I will share the recording on the Teams for everybody.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.